Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We'll just wait for a few seconds so you could be settled in. And also, there's going to be really informative, engaging webinar that I want to thank you all for attending today's presentation. In the chat option, by all means, introduce yourself. What's your name? Some challenges that you're experiencing. What business industry you're in, so that Ms. Janine will be able to collaborate and also provide new strategies for your business ideas or business to take it to the next level. If you have any questions, by all means, I encourage you to participate. You could put in the chat option, or perhaps in the Q&A would be best, so that I'll be able to moderate the questions for you. So when it's time for the Q&A and throughout the presentation, Janine will be able to respond to your questions. This webinar is being recorded, and also at the end of the event, I'll be able to send you the file, the presentation, along with the video recording as well. So in case you have to step out, answer a phone call, urgent meeting, by all means, we'll be more than happy to provide you the necessary information on how we can assist you with your business needs. So I want to thank you all once again. My name is Jesus Padilla. I am the program manager of the Florida SBDC at FIU, and I want to thank you once again for attending. I have a great honor to have Janine San Luis. She's one of our business consultants here at the Florida SBDC at FIU. This webinar is part under the Miami-Dade Business Navigator program, which is community partners working together to grow your business. What is the Business Navigator? The SBA Community Navigator program was established part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 and uses this approach to help small businesses with the economic recovery. The program is comprised of the lead hub, in which this case is the Florida SBDC at FIU, as a center of networks of spokes organizations that deploy community advocates to work with small businesses on recovery and resilience. In addition, what is the purpose? What is the goal? The goal is to improve the long-term economic recovery and resiliency among small businesses. Focus is placed on businesses owned by veterans, women, as well as socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. The core program activities include technical assistance, trainings and outreach, and sharing information and resources. Under the Community Navigator program, our group secured a 2-year, $2.5 million grant to create a Navigator network for Miami-Dade County businesses. The focus is to create a strong local community navigator network to assist socially and economic disadvantaged businesses with consulting, trainings, and mentoring. So once again, we partner with our key targets of minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, LGBTQ-owned businesses. In addition, we have who are our spokes, who are our key partners. In this case, we have Ascendis, branches, the South Miami-Dade EDC, the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce, Prospera, Sarba Procurement, and as well as the Florida SBDC at FIU. In addition, I will be sending you the link of our website to register to meet with one of our spokes or navigators, and how we can assist you and take your business to the next step. So once again, any questions, encourage you to put in the Q&A, introduce yourself, networking, and without further ado, Janine, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Jesus. And I appreciate all the things that you all do for the small business community here in Miami-Dade. So let me go ahead and start with sharing my screen. So give me 1 second. Awesome. Jesus, everything good? You can see it on your end?
Yes,
just want to make sure.
You're good.
Okay, great. Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, welcome to Negotiate Like a Boss. My absolute favorite topic to train business owners on, and I'm excited to walk through with you a couple of the techniques and skill sets that you'll have for your business and what you do. I know that some of you have been, thanks for sharing a couple of information that you have in as you're coming in. Remember to also put in what type of business you are. I'd love for you to just put it in the chat. Are you a B2C business or B2B? Because I can then also customize a little bit more for this afternoon's training based on who is in the room. So if you can just go ahead and drop in the chat, if you're a B2B or B2C business, that would be great. So here's a piece of what you want to take into account with negotiation and negotiating like a boss here this afternoon. So number one, it's really the key to building sustainable partnerships. If you're ever looking into taking, I thank you so much for sharing B2C. If you're looking to take your business B2C into the B2B space, you want to do business with corporate, you want to do business on the B2B market, and even eventually into the government sector, there's a number of negotiation takeaways that you'll want to take into consideration. So a few things that I want to kind of share with you this afternoon is I want you to understand why people say no to begin with as businesses or as potential clients. What is behind that no? How do we decipher the no? How are we really going for a yes, but not all yeses are the same. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk through building in relationships and how to cultivate those relationships with your client base. I will share with you a little bit about the process. This is my proprietary process. I'm also a business owner myself, in the way that I've created for negotiation and some of the things that you might want to take a look at. Then we're going to dive into a little bit about the power of mirroring and labeling, which is a negotiation technique in you being able to get more information out of the individual that's sitting across the table from you. And we'll go into everyday negotiation. We'll wrap up with everyday negotiations and how to put this into work. This will take us a little bit, 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll save a little bit of time later on for questions. All right. All right, so a little bit about me. My background's in negotiation. How I got started was in really the sales route. So have loved sales for a long time. You don't really aspire for a career in sales. You kind of it kind of falls into your lap in a way. And that was my growth trajectory. I've been in development work on nonprofit organizations, but I've also overseen sales teams in the software and tech space. And one of the expertise that I rely on, not only on closing deals, but dealing with hostile negotiations and cultural negotiations. So if you're doing business, not only here in South Florida, but you're doing business internationally, some of these techniques will apply. Cultural customs will also take into effect for you to also think through and what you need to bring to the table. So I want you all to drop in the chat right now, what is the part of the negotiation process that you hate the most? So I'll take a minute to just pause here. Tell me what part of the negotiation process maybe makes you feel uncomfortable, or you're just like, you know what, this is the part that I just cannot, my stomach turns when I have to do. Why? Pitching. All right. Well, we will definitely get you some more comfort into the pitching. What else? What other things are the processes of the negotiation process that you dislike, that you want to look to overcome? Take a minute to post that into the chat. Sometimes getting back control of the meeting. Yeah, absolutely. So how do we set those expectations for the meeting to begin with? And doing that. I agree with Kamala. I think that you have also sent me some private messages. Okay, great. So budget is also something. So asking for when it comes down to money, reading through contract language. Okay, so sometimes it's a little bit cumbersome to read through contract language. Okay, so thank you. So these are all great pieces, and then we are hoping to address this in the next hour. All right. So let's talk a little bit about why people say no at this time. So here's the piece, and thank you. Okay, commitment and time management. Absolutely. So commitment and time management can be a little bit of a hurdle to overcome as it relates to negotiation. So let's talk a little bit about why people say no. So people say no because there's a number of reasons, all that are listed here. But I will tell you the number one reason why people say no is because they did not understand what you were putting in front of them. And when a person doesn't understand, the first initial reaction is to say no because they don't know what's in front of them, right? They don't want to feel stupid. Maybe they don't want to ask the questions or whatever it is. So that's the number one reason why people say no. The other reason that people say no is I'm not ready yet. I don't understand. I don't think I can afford it. I want something else. I need more information. A lot of times you're not talking to the right person. So they are not the decision maker that you need in front of you. So that is another reason why people say no. So let's kind of go into the reasons why how people say yes. The, and knowing that not all yeses are the same. So there are three types of yeses. One of my favorite books, I always quote it on these seminars, but it still stands the test of time, which is it's called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I had the pleasure of getting some training in his method, and this is something that I will be infusing throughout this training this afternoon. These are one of the tactics as far as how you decipher the yes within what people tell you that Chris Voss preaches and talks a little bit about. So there's three types of yeses. There's a counterfeit yes, there's a confirmation yes, and there's a commitment yes. We are always looking for the commitment yes. My goal for you this afternoon for this particular segment is for you to understand how do we get to these commitment yes faster, but more importantly, how are we seeing through those individuals that maybe don't want to commit at this time? I'm going to share with you there are three types of clients that you're going to come across at any particular time. So these are prospective clients rather. So three types of prospective clients. Number one, there is a client that is ready now. Number two, there are clients that are ready later. And number three, there are clients that are ready never. Okay, so those are three types of prospective clients. Our goal is how are we focused in on more so deciphering those people that are ready now versus the people that are ready later, and not spending as much time on those people that are never ready, right? And so those are the things that this is how we kind of decipher these things. So it's the number one way to do that is by asking how and what questions. And I'll share with you an example. So walking through the types of yeses, the counterfeit yes, I'm sure many of you have been in a circumstance that maybe you're now, as we're coming back into networking events and coming in person and that sort of thing, that you might have met someone for the first time and, you know, they were just not your vibe. They were not the type of person that maybe you don't think it's a right fit and it's not going to go anywhere. And that's perfectly okay, depending on the way that they've approached you. But they are very, very interested in maybe you following up with you or scheduling a second call, but there's probably not a chance that you're going to do that. So just to kind of save face, you say yes at the time, but then you kind of you flake out later on, or you kind of reschedule later on. So they might say something along the lines of like, Jesus, it was so great to meet you today. I'd love to schedule coffee for next week at 3 p.m. How does that work? How does that sound? And then Jesus might tell me, well, Yanine, I'm not sure. I don't think that that's a good idea. Or, actually, my schedule's really booked and I have to see. And then you say, well, what if I reach out to you in 2 weeks? How does that sound? Well, and you see this kind of back and forth where people are kind of indecisive, doesn't really provide straight answers. They're likely giving you a counterfeit yes. They don't want to really straight out tell you, listen, it's just not a right fit. Some people might, but the likelihood is that people won't tell you straight out, this is not a right fit. I just don't think that this is going to go anywhere. So without us wasting more time, I just want to stop this at this time, right? People usually don't, aren't as direct. I do appreciate those that are, but usually they aren't as direct. So they might give you kind of a counterfeit yes. But as you can see in the way that I was approaching in that scenario, I was saying how and what. How's next Tuesday at 3? What if I reach out to you in 2 weeks, right? So asking those how and what questions is really key in understanding and testing their level of commitment. Confirmation yeses are, for example, what color is behind me? It's pink. Or do I have palm trees behind me? Yes, I do, right? Or I have some plants behind me? Yes, I do. So confirmation is just kind of confirming what, the information is in front of us. Commitment agrees upon, people are, there's a follow-up that is secured, we have a time and date in place. And I want to be very clear about that, because as far as our sales process goes, especially for those of you who are doing business B2B, we always want to make sure to leave the conversation with the next meeting booked. If you are in front of a captive audience, make sure that you are booking that next meeting. You are not leaving that conversation without that next booked meeting. And the reason for that is because it is so much harder to get that prospective client back in the fold if that meeting is not booked, that meeting's not scheduled. I'm sure that some of you have run into that run around of back and forth. And so before we leave that next meeting, we're committing and we're making a commitment to that next following meeting. All right, so that is our, confirmations, our yeses and the type of yeses that we see. So I want to take a minute to also explain to you, for those of you who use, and if you're already using it, my high suggestion is for you to think through what kind of customer relationship management system you are operating on, a CRM. And it could be a variety. There's a number of different CRMs that are accessible that integrate with your QuickBooks or integrate with your accounting systems. There's a number of them. Salesforce is always the leading one, but that could be a little costly for small businesses. Sometimes, there's Pipedrive. There's a number of CRM systems, HubSpot. And this is a good method in the way that you can label your CRM and actually kind of customer journey where they're at in the journey. But this is also something that I want to also share with you, because depending on where your relationship is with anybody, by the way, the relationship cycle is not just as it relates to sales. The relationship cycle is with anybody in your life. They fall under a phase of this cycle, and there are four phases. So there's the discovery phase, there is the engagement phase, there's the solicitation phase, and lastly, there is the stewardship phase. And so let me kind of share with you what each of the phases are and what exactly is operating under these phases. So discovery phase is, as you can imagine, all the things that have to do with discovery. So you're prepared. It's how you prepare, right? What you're doing FBI investigative research. You're going on LinkedIn, maybe you're finding out the background. You are trying to figure out if there's any synergies. Do you have any people in connection with? You're also kind of just getting to know each other, right? So you're getting to know each other, like what they do, what's their background. From a discovery to engagement, I'd like to say that that's kind of like the falling in love phase. So you are cultivating a little bit more of that relationship. Engagement is a little bit like cultivation. Maybe you have learned that they have a particular interest in a certain, let's say the arts or sports, and maybe they love a certain team, and you might say, hey, did you catch the game last night, or did you see XYZ? Like, you're making that connection, you're making good on what you've already heard from what they like, and you're kind of engaging with them on those pieces. From engagement to solicitation is where we talk a little bit about building trust. So how are we building trust with people and with our clientele? And a lot of times these can be phases of the type of meeting that you're having with people. So engagement and solicitation, the building of trust can look like, what happens in the way that we build trust is we run through a series of what's called low stakes asks that we're making of people to high stakes asks of what we're making of people. The likelihood of me coming into a meeting and asking for your business, in the sense of asking for $1 million off the bat without building trust, without engagement, without cultivation, the likelihood of me securing that deal is maybe highly unlikely, right? Depending on the way that we build trust. I might ask you out to dinner first, or I might ask you out to a lunch meeting. I might ask you, these are like low stakes asks. I might ask you, to connect, maybe somebody, one of your current network of people are trying to connect with you, or that you've asked for a strategic connection. That's a low stakes ask, right? So we're consistently building trust in the solicitation, from engagement to solicitation. Solicitation is exactly what we think through. We're asking for the sale, we're asking for the pitch. And here's where the phase that I feel a number of people really don't do the best job in, which is the stewardship phase. After the relationship and the customer has bought from you, after they've engaged with you, after you've had an active contract, what are you doing to follow up with them? So, how are we taking our transactional type relationship into transformative, but how are we following up with them and really nurturing the relationship? And I'll give you a personal example, not just a client example. I'm sure that each and every one of you has ever come into a circumstance where you might have needed a favor from someone, and you know exactly the person that you need it from, but it's been a long time since you've reached out to them. um, and you feel a little guilty, right, reaching out to them. Usually that guilt comes with, man, it's been a while, I don't want to be construed as the only that person only contacts me when they need something, right? So don't be that way with your clients. Think about the way that you nurture the relationship beyond just that first active transaction. The old saying is very true to this day. It costs way more money to run customer acquisition campaigns of new customers than it does to retain and upgrade your existing customers. And that is a very much a product of stewardship and really ensuring that you have a robust stewardship process. And like I mentioned here, with this sales cycle and this kind of relationship cycle, people go through, we discover their new needs, we engage them and cultivate them again, we resolicit them for a new business, and we continue to steward. So it kind of continues to evolve into a cycle. So here is the methodology as far as, and the framework for you all to use when you're in an active solicitation or an active negotiation. And here's the thing, because you don't ever, a sales conversation with someone is never just, you don't ever schedule that follow-up conversation. You're like, all right, today will be our negotiation conversation. Usually it's kind of intertwined and woven into a sales pitch. It comes at the end. It comes when you are proposing your packages or your offerings, and you're kind of talking through with the client, hey, this is what I recommend of what you need to go with, you're talking about timeline, you're talking about these things. That's usually when negotiation is wrapped into the sales process. So here are some things and techniques that I want you to think through as you prepare for the actual meeting for the sales pitch. Number one is getting into the mindset. So how are you preparing? So we talked a little bit about what makes us uncomfortable, but we all know the objections we're going to face. The key here is, how are we conquering? How are we really preparing for those objections that we're going to face? So we can matrix those objections in the sense that we can say, okay, these are all the objections that we're going to face. We're going to put it in a simple Excel, or you can write it down old school style. And you're going to say, look, these are the responses that I'm going to come up with as far as when I get that response. Getting in the mindset is, how are we also ensuring that the day of whatever pitch we're going to have, whatever meeting that we're going to have, we're also in the framework of, have we done our research beforehand? What's the process that led us into this meeting? Do I have enough information to proceed forward, right? I will tell you something. A lot of times there's times that you can prepare enough to get to that meeting, to wing the meeting. But if you don't prepare, winging it will just look unprofessional. So that's just something that you want to take into consideration. Setting the expectation. So, some of you had chatted into the chat of the fact that, taking control of the meeting. You definitely want to take control of the meeting from the get-go, from the beginning, and you need to kind of take command and say, even if it's just an introduction meeting, we're here today. So nice to meet you. I can say, Jesus, since he's on with me, Jesus, it's so great to connect with you today. What I love to do is I would love to get to know about what you're doing, and share a little bit about what we do. And if we think appropriate, I'd love to share with you a couple opportunities of us collaborating. How does that sound? Is there anything else you'd like for us to cover at this time? Right? That kind of setting the expectation is setting the expectation. That's a sample setting of the expectation of an initial meeting. The other thing is, and this is something I always tell small business owners, you are entitled to have your own process on how you best like to be worked with. And I say that because I don't think we hear it enough. A lot of times as business owners, we forego our process and we kind of just adapt to whatever process is in front of us, and we follow whatever protocol is in front of us. However, take control in the sense of saying, and these are just very simple words, our process is, and you can say our process is, we have this initial meeting. Afterwards, I'd love to, conduct a really robust discovery session. And from that meeting, I'd love to be able to kind of share with you some options of us working together. That is our internal process. You need to be able to set those expectations with the client. And you can say, I'm happy to understand what your process is so that we can become in alignment. And here's the other piece. When you are having an initial meeting with someone, know that there's people that are a right fit for you, and there's people that are not a right fit for you. I'm sure that each and every one of you can think through the type of client that isn't a right fit, right? Because those are some of the maybe nightmare clients that you've had in the past. So I welcome you to think through what your expectation and your process is, so that you can decipher who is a right fit for you, and more importantly, who is not a right fit for you. And you kind of send them their way. The big thing about negotiation, everyone, especially in this process of discovery, is pay very close attention. I'm going to say that again. Pay very, very close attention to the way that clients treat you through this process of the sales process. The reason I say that, if they are disorganized, if they're not sending you items on time, perhaps some of you might have to execute NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, to be able to price out things for clients. And if they're not sending you things on time, or they're very difficult to work with, that is a preview of the type of client they're going to be when you engage them for a full-time contract. And I'll say that is, a lot of times sometimes we get excited, and our excitement blurs our vision and blurs the excite, it blurs what's in front of us. We get so excited about what that potential client can be that we miss the red flags, and we're like, well, we'll just deal with it. They'll just change. And that's not the case. Usually what that process is at the beginning is going to be a preview of the amplification of what that looks like for the actual relationship. And I say that because they might not be a right fit to begin with. And you better cut your losses sooner rather than later. So that's just something about, setting the expectation. Mirroring and labeling. This is an incredible technique in negotiation, which is about how do we get, especially with clients that are very difficult in how they are giving us information, they're not giving us enough information. I like to kind of do the mirroring and labeling. And mirroring and labeling is simply repeating the last 3-5 words your counterpart has said, using an upward inflection, like an actual question. So what I mean by that is, maybe if I ask a question like, so tell me a little bit about, how your business is recovering post-pandemic. And someone tells you, well, we're doing fine. And I might say, as in mirroring them, we're doing fine. So I'm repeating back to them, and I say, we're doing fine, because that kind of like gives you a question like, well, what do you mean by that? And they might say, yeah, there's been a couple of things that are happening infrastructure wise, or we're hiring less people, or whatever it is, right? It gives them, an opportunity to open up more. The mirroring is that upward inflection I've just used. The labeling would then be validating whatever they're saying. So I might say, if in that response that I just provided you, I might say something along the lines of like, well, it seems that you're having a lot of um, internal turnover, and and some, maybe some employee disengagement. Is that correct? And now you'd be like, yeah, actually, and then they might go into another stream of whatever it is, right? So the mirroring is that repeating of those words, upward inflection in the way that you're asking, the labeling and validation of what the information that you've just received, right? And when you're validating, you want to use terms like it seems like, it sounds like, it feels like. It seems like, it sounds like, it feels like. What we don't want to use is words and terms like what I'm hearing is. And the reason for that is because it's coming from a first person perspective versus you're kind of just assessing the entire situation, right? You're just giving your own perspective of what I hear is this, versus it seems like you're going through a hard time with recruiting new team members. It seems, or it feels like you're feeling a lot of frustration as it relates to XYZ, right? So that's how you're labeling. So the mirroring and labeling technique also provides that context of getting more information. The other piece of this framework in the way that you mirror and label is pay very, very close attention to not only like body language, right? So here, for the most part, a lot of times people have been conducting meetings via Zoom or via online, and less in person. This is kind of evolving now as we are hitting post-pandemic era now, and going back in person. But I think a lot more people still are conducting a lot of business online. Pay very close attention to the body language. How are people responding? Do they look distracted? Are they moving their mouse over here? Maybe they're doing multitasking. Are they not paying attention to you? Are they looking straight ahead? Is their eyebrows furrowed? Is there, how is their, are they kind of leaning back? Are they leaning in? Pay close attention to the body language. And I would say, don't wait to the end to address it. Address it when you see it. It feels like you might feel uncomfortable from what I just shared with you as relates to pricing. Let's talk about that. And they might be like, oh, okay, I need to be better. I need to be better prepared to combat what's how I'm presenting, or how I am reflecting other people, and how they're seeing me. But I say that because you want to address that now and not wait till the end of your pitch, because at that point, it might be very critical to maybe walk through again whatever it is that you're doing. It seems like you might not understand what we talked about. Do you have any questions about that? Actually, yes, I'm not sure if that timeline really works for us because we're in the middle of XYZ, right? And you can go ahead and troubleshoot that versus getting the no later. The more objections you face at the beginning, everyone, no is what begins the negotiation. It's not what prevents the sale. The more that you understand the no's that are in front of you, I want no's to come out in the beginning. The better it will equip you to create a custom experience for the client or the prospect that you're dealing with. Lastly, the method here that I want to share with you is closing. How are we leaving? And my whole thing is, like, a lot of people say, first impressions are everything. I would say the last impression is the lasting impression. So to me, is how are you leaving the lasting impression in the way that you are communicating with them during the solicitation? How are you using respect, and really closing out the positivity within that working relationship, and what the next, and then outlining the timeline and the next steps with you. So that is a little bit about just kind of the methodology and the framework that you want to take into consideration as it relates to the negotiation process. So my biggest and one of my favorite pieces that Chris Voss shares is, you're not empathetic if you can't show empathy to someone who strongly disagrees with you. I say this is because every 4 years, it seems, although we're always having elections, everybody becomes a political analyst, right? And sometimes you think about, and especially when someone disagrees with you, it's about getting curious. Negotiation is about getting curious about what that person is across the table is experiencing, but more importantly, what background they come from and how you can relate to them as it relates to business. And so some of the techniques that I've shared with you, especially with the mirroring and labeling, and that technique that I shared, which is one of the techniques Chris Voss teaches, is tactical empathy, right? So we are being tactfully empathetic, and we are validating others across the table. A couple of things. Tactical empathy is really about understanding the other person's mindset and feelings. The goal really here is not, I just want to be very clear, just because you understand another person's feeling doesn't mean that you agree with them. It's just a matter of how you come across as understanding. The goal is for them to feel understood. More talking and less listening, more listening and less talking, not more talking and more listening. More listening and less talking. Asking questions is key. Again, how and what questions for you are going to be the key here. Here's a couple of things that we want to take into consideration. And by the way, you're going to have these slides later on so that you can take with you. This is a little bit through that second piece. So maybe you've had that first initial contact, but you need to dive into deeper with the client. This is incredibly useful, especially for my B2B businesses or those that are venturing into go to B2B. What are some of the questions that you're asking them? So what the key challenge, frustration, problem, or aspiration and opportunity is, you need to think through that. Why have they arrived at that diagnosis, and are they right to have arrived in that diagnosis? What the impact or ripple effect of the challenge, frustration, or aspiration or opportunity is? What's their future vision of the way that, what's their future vision of how this will come together? What's the most immediate urgent need they have right now? What's driving that sense of urgency, assuming there is urgency? Because here's the thing, you can't create urgency where there's no urgency, but you can bring to light any issues that they might have not considered, and they can make a decision for themselves, whether it's not, you're guiding them essentially. And what is the problem currently costing them? If you are able to quantify for a prospective client the problem of what it's already costing them, you're going to be miles ahead of where you need to be. And this is just, again, needs discovery conversation. The Bold House community, which is an incredible community of individuals here in South Florida, and actually here in globally. This is one of their proprietary methods of needs discovery conversation. So just wanted to give you that tool and resource as well. Here's another method, and this is the SPIN methodology. This is the way that we sell. And so this is SPIN selling, and there's basically how you structure your questions when you are doing a needs discovery conversation, but when you are pitching, not just pitching your services, but you are kind of understanding where, and you're running a diagnostic of where the client is. So S is for situation. How are you addressing questions as it relates to the situation that they're currently going through? P is about the problem. So you're kind of diving into especially the problem and what's happening. I, implication or impact. So what impact is that current problem having on their business? And lastly, the needs payoff, right? If this were to be resolved, what is the payoff of that result? Okay, so that's something that you might want to think through as far as SPIN and that methodology. Here are some questions here that I put there, and I know that some of you are pinging in the chat about, will the presentation be available? Yes, there will be a replay, and yes, we will be sending you this deck. So these are some of the questions as it relates to understanding the status quo and how you want to address them moving forward as it relates to some of your clients. So tell me a little bit about how you're currently addressing X. Can you tell me about your current, blank? How do you feel it's working today? Can you tell me if your services industry for, I don't know, let's say training for HR professionals. Can you tell me about how your current professional development is working with your employees? How do you feel it works today? How would you describe your blank as it is today? How would you describe your sales cycle as it relates today? How would you describe your whatever it is that you're selling for, the problem it is that you are solving for? Talk through that. That's how you fill the blank. What does your blank program, team, project, etc. look like today? Can you give me an overview of where things are today? So these are just some, you don't have to ask all these questions in this order, but these are some questions to kind of get the conversation started. This is a little bit about what's the gap. So problems, you know, in the way that you're fixating on the gap. You know, what are your biggest frustrations when it comes to blank? What do you think your biggest obstacle is to achieving greater, you know, revenue when it comes to X, Y, Z? Based on how things are approached today, what do you think your biggest concerns are? What do you wish were different? Why do you feel you have an issue with blank? Why do you want to do blank, right? So these are other questions for you to consider in the way that we're talking about the SPIN methodology in the problem section. Lastly, the last two, implication. You have a couple here. You know, what opportunities are you missing out on? You know, what won't happen for you if your department or your company, if this challenge isn't addressed? So you're getting them to think through, if this problem is not solved, how am I going to resolve this? How am I going to move forward? This is how you're creating the sense of urgency and how you're kind of creating what is really a priority for them at that time. And lastly, needs payoff. You know, if this challenge is addressed successfully, what will be the value to your company? What would be the most valuable payoff to addressing this issue? How else might it help your organization? You know, if you were, you know, based on what we discussed in terms of what it's currently costing you, if you were to put an even 25% dent in the problem, you would save about X percentage. Is that correct? Or X amount of dollars, right? If you can quantify how much the problem is costing them, I'm going to tell you, you're going to be miles ahead of whoever competitors and that sort of thing. The quantification of a problem of how much it's costing them is going to help you be able to close the sale and close the deal. These are tactics, everyone, that can be used in absolutely everyday negotiations, from, you know, flight upgrades to fees being waived to discounts. It's all about how we're using that mirroring and labeling technique I was sharing with you before. And tactical empathy is an opportunity for you to really get close to the individual, but also, you know, how can we make this work is usually a question I ask a lot of times, right? I've been stuck in several airports, snowed in and everything else, with the line snaking around. Usually when I get to that counter, I'm like, you know, I empathize with the person. I'm sure that you're, you know, I say something along the lines of like, I'm sure you're really frustrated at this time, and how's your day going? And I'm, you know, connecting with that person, and you can ask those requests. You know, you're gonna find that I'm ridiculous about this, but you know, what would it take? You know, how can we make this work for me to be able to get a flight home on time, or whatever it is? You'd be surprised, the mirroring and labeling, and some of these techniques, how of the negotiation can get you further in where we want to go. A couple of other questions, and just languaging for you to think through and ask. When someone gives you an objection, you know, what do you mean by that? How can we make this work? Or what are ways we can develop a win-win scenario for us? So how and what questions are things to have in your back pocket to be able to really decipher and go through as well. Great lines to use as well. It seems like there's nothing I can say to change your mind. At that point, you kind of see where that person is, and whether or not they're the right fit. I usually love asking people, you know, I don't ever say, you know, who are the decision makers here, right? Because I do think that every single person has some decision level making power, right? Or decision making level power inside of an organization, and they don't want to feel powerless. But I usually like to ask, you know, who here is going to weigh in on the decision if this project was a success or not. And whoever is going to weigh in on those decisions, I'd like for them to be part of the next meeting. So that's what I usually do as far as getting people to come in and join in on the conversation. How can we make this work? You've heard me say that. It sounds like you're powerless here is a statement that can be said. I know that kind of sounds a little harsh, but I usually use this statement to be able to reflect, when it's a given scenario where it's like, it really feels like you're powerless in this situation in the way that we navigate that next step. How would you see for us to proceed forward, right? It's usually used in situations where it's kind of like a Hail Mary situation, but it's also used in situations where you want to assert that maybe that person needs to make another introduction to a person that can has a higher decision level power that they can make. So lastly, before we open it up to questions, I will share with you all, I hope that this has been insightful for you over the last 47 minutes. But I want to share with you, hope really in your business is not a strategy. What we do here with the Business Navigator program and what we do with our clients and what I help do is really help them prepare to win, right? Everybody here has the ability to win, but in order to do so, you have to plan, prepare, and expect to win. So with that, I drop in my LinkedIn. You can look me up here, Yanin San Luis, and my email. And I'll turn it over to you, Jesus, to facilitate questions at this time. So if you want to go ahead, everyone, and there is a Q&A section here in the webinar if you want to go ahead and ask some questions, or you can just also place it in the chat and I'll take questions at this time.
At this moment, I don't see any questions. So by all means, like if you have any particular questions, concerns, don't hesitate. You're more than happy to send me an email. Oh, let me put on my camera. I'm sorry.
We're seeing your lovely headshot.
Yeah. Sabine, just input your question in the chat, and Yanin will be able to respond to your question. So once again, right here is our email address, follow our social media channels for our upcoming events that we have. We have plenty, and from all different topics from each of our spokes as well. Follow our YouTube channel, because that's where all of our webinars that will be recorded will be uploaded there immediately. So like I said, we're family. Anything that we could do to assist with your small business needs, if it's access to capital, government contracting, incorporating your business, marketing, certifications, business planning, we're here to help you out, not only from the SBDC side, but the other spokes as well. That we're here to help you and create that local economic impact in the long term throughout the community. So I'm not sure if Ms. Sabine has actually responded or asked the question.
Let me just look. I haven't seen it yet, but if anybody has an individual scenario, we can just wait another minute or so, see if they can to put it in.
Perfect. And then also, if any of your businesses are in the government contracting sector, we do have a webinar tomorrow. So I'll be able to email you all individually the link as well, in case if you're interested. So right there, you'll be more than happy to register and get to know how to use your certifications for government contracting opportunities. And I have Emilio has one question. Emilio, by all means, feel free to put in the Q&A, and I'll be more happy to moderate it for you.
Perfect. I remember what you said in a line to use. I think you're powerless here. Don't you think that might be counterproductive? So I just want to be very, very clear about that, Emilio. It really depends on the scenario. I don't think that this scenario should be used. I don't think this question and this statement should be used in all given scenarios. This might be in a scenario where I find myself, I'll tell you very candidly, there's a number of businesses that might be doing on the B2B side with merger and acquisitions, and that person perhaps is changing within roles, and you're not, remember, it's all about tone here. It's not like you're going to say, well, it looks like you're powerless here, right? Me saying something like that versus like, it really feels like you're powerless here. How do you think that we should proceed in this given scenario, right? That approach is very different from the former approach of what I've shared with you. It also depends on the scenario that's being used. So I just want to be very clear on that. I appreciate you bringing it up. It's not to be used in every single scenario. It really it's a way of how you are. It's has to deal a lot with tone, but more importantly, you're kind of opening it up where you are encouraging that individual, like where do you're almost asking them, where do you see this going? It feels like you're powerless here. How do you see us proceeding at this time? Or do you feel that there might be another department that would benefit from these services at this time? It depends obviously on the scenario, but you're absolutely right. You don't use that in every single scenario because it would come across very, very harshly. Okay, great. Okay, I'm a licensed massage, so I'm seeing Sabine. I'm a licensed massage therapist, licensed skincare specialist, and licensed. Okay. Oh, I find it awkward to share the life insurance. So here's how I see, you know, here's how I see that kind of. I think Sabine, I would probably need some more context here. I think is it awkward because it's you don't want to be like doing skincare and then also saying, hey, so how about that life insurance? I'm sure that that's not how you want to weave. I'm assuming that you have different prospect verticals at this time, with different pieces. But I think it's just a natural conversation of like, how do you plan? It's like retirement planning, but how do you plan for, what does your legacy look like, right? I like, especially with life insurance, what do you think your legacy will be? Is there, financial planning is something that you have to think through in that way. So I feel like the awkwardness needs to kind of construe in the sense of who are you serving? Who's the type of clients? And not everybody, you don't have to be all in one. You don't have to be like a one-stop shop with everyone. You have to just kind of like there's some clients that will be a natural fit for you to sell, different things to. But I don't think that I want to be in a massage. And I don't think a lot of people want to be in a massage, but also learning about life insurance as well, right? You might have to kind of really niche focus on the verticals. And my question back to you on that would be, where is it that you want to grow the business, right? Do you want to grow it in the massage therapy? If you want to grow it in the skincare, do you want to grow it in the life insurance? And so, kind of being focused on one of those verticals and seeing that growth trajectory is something that I would recommend for you. I hope that helps.
Okay.
Any
But
other
like I said,
questions?
if there's no additional questions, I will be emailing you obviously my email information, so I'll be able to answer it, connect you with Janine as well, and how we could assist with your business needs. So, like I said, the webinar will be recorded and the presentation will be emailed to you. So, any reference point, by all means, I will be more than happy to assist you and go more in depth on how your business could tailor based on today's presentation and go more in depth. So thank you again for attending today's webinar, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Oh, I have one question.
Awesome.
Oh,
Oh,
perfect. All right, thank you, and thank you, Patricia, and thank you, Michelle. I'll see you at the next webinar. Take
bye
care.
everyone.
All right, bye bye.